All right. Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of my Octatrack tutorials. I know it's been a while. I have no excuses. Well, I do. I have plenty of excuses, actually. I played a bunch of shows. I got really busy. I was working on composing gigs. I'm still working on those gigs. I've started playing shows. I already said that. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of stuff, and they do involve the Octatrack. I would say roughly maybe 50% of everything I'm doing right now with music involves the Octatrack. But it hasn't really afforded me very much time to A, make videos, and B, kind of just explore. So I just came up with this thing. This trick that I really just had to show you. And so that kind of brought me out of quote unquote retirement. I was never really over it. I just needed a bit of time to kind of gather my strength, so to speak. So in any case, let me just show you. I'm not going to be able to cover like everything that I've learned in the last, 6 months since I put out a video. But I'm just going to start with this really cool trick, which honestly, and I'm not just hyping this shit up because I haven't made a video in a long time. This might be one of the coolest tricks that I've had. And I feel like it's a culmination of a lot of the things that I've been trying to do with the Octatrack. And I finally just, maybe part of it was that I did take a break from it. But anyway, I've figured something out and I want to share it with you. So to begin with, let's just talk about what everything is right now. And the main parts are, we've got a kick here. We have got a little drum. Nothing particularly out of the ordinary with this. Then we have a beat shake, which actually isn't being used. I mean, these are all just flavor things because this is literally just a jam that I had the other day, and then I kind of incorporated this piece. Okay, so one other thing you'll want to know, we've got the master here, we've got a through machine. The through machine is mainly listening to my Octatrack, my OP1. And this pickup machine is referring to track 7, which is my OP1. So I can loop the through machine into my pickup machine. But that's actually not the most essential part. The most essential part is this track here, track 6. All right, so I had a particular dilemma in my mind, which was, and you guys, if any of you have seen my previous videos, I talk about live jamming a lot. And let me just set this all off. Okay, so we have a clear track. Basically what we're doing is we have a flex machine right here. And it's playing this, this is actually a 2-bar rhythm that I designed in Ableton with one of their just like drum rack patterns. And I just kind of made this pattern on my own. I exported a set of maybe like 8 of my own kind of creations, 2-bar form, threw them into the Octatrack. And so I've been kind of talking to you guys about live jams and how you can kind of like create these fun variations that you don't necessarily have full control over or full knowledge of what's going to happen. And typically the way that I would kind of suggest doing it in the past was I would say, okay, we'll have a, we slice it up, slice it to like 32 slices because it's 32 steps in 2 bars. And you get all these little slices that are basically like 16th note slices. And you can basically go like this, play random ones, and then you can go up to this menu in the audio editor and say, create random locks, or you can create linear locks as well. So you get these kind of random little pieces, which can sound really interesting. They can also sound less interesting. And in that case, you end up having to kind of like tweak things back and forth. So say I'm like, okay, well, I don't really like that one. I mean, it's actually a pretty cool rhythm just because I arbitrarily hit this sequence and these things kind of sound nice in my mind. But in cases where you want to sort of shape the sound a little bit more, I found that sometimes it was just kind of hit or miss, you know. And in the grand scheme of doing a live set, you don't want to be like, you know, taking each trig and kind of being like, okay, well, what slice would work instead? And then just kind of like listening to it. I mean, you could, You could totally do that, but the way I was kind of thinking of it, it just felt a little bit like a few too many steps to be like, okay, well, let's go into this menu and hit random locks again. Even though that was like a revelation to me a year ago. I was like, holy shit, you can just randomize these trigs. You can just be like, I don't like that one, let's do it again. Okay, that one's pretty boring, right? Let's do it again. And unfortunately, there's a lot of little pieces in there that just aren't really all that interesting. So then I sort of created this problem in my mind where I'm like, okay, well, I take time away from creating melodies and responding because I'm too busy trying to figure out what rhythm will sound cool so that I can then move on to the next step. And so in my mind, I've been calling this thing like mental CPU. So like if you're in a jam situation, say you're a jazz pianist, if you don't have a lot of experience with music theory, it's not going to be easy for you to free up your mental CPU if you're worried about what the right and wrong notes are. But if you have it built into your muscle memory of like, oh, these are where the notes are going to be, then all of a sudden your CPU is now directed towards other things like, what does this chord feel like to me? And how can I sort of develop that? So like in the same way, I've been looking at the Octatrack as this tool where you can end up using a ton of CPU on just making sure everything's running properly. And that can end up just taking time away from the creative side. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to take an LFO, we're going to attach it to the source, the start source, and we're going to give it a wave. You can choose, you can choose any kind of wave you want. I would recommend doing the ones that kind of sweep across all values because you're basically trying to use an LFO to move around the start point so that every time it hits one of these trigs, it's at a different start point. And you don't want to use random because random will never repeat. I mean, you could want to use random depending on what kind of music you're trying to make. But in my case, I'm looking for something that will repeat once I've kind of like settled on something. So hopefully this will all make more sense once I start playing it. But let's say we're going with a saw because this is the most simple way of thinking about it. So let's say we have 32 slices. Each one is a 16th note. And in the LFO, we are going to move the depth to 32. So what this means is that the depth is going to have a range of 32 values. And then if I move the start point to slice 17, that means that the lowest point of this wave, which is a saw wave, the lowest point will be slice 1, and the highest point will be 32, because the depth is moving from negative 16 values to positive 16 values. That's kind of how these saw waves work. Same thing with the triangle and all of that. They go under and over that amount, so the depth needs to be basically your maximum amount, and then where you put the midpoint, or where you put your starting parameter should be at the midpoint of that wave. So let's make sure the depth is at the right place. I've also these are just the parameters that I've decided look the best, and I can actually tell what's going on. So let's set the speed to 25, set it to trig sync trig. This is also important because it means that over the course of this single bar, it's just going to keep repeating. So if I do want a pattern that repeats at all times, then I can see that happen each time. So let's just go into this and see what happens. And what else did I want to do? Okay, so this is just a quality of life thing for me. If you hold function and go all the way down to slices, typically this is for when you want to play these slices like this, but it actually serves a double function of showing you the slices and showing you when they get triggered. So you can see we have this kind of random pattern, right? And so basically what's happening in the background of this is I am adjusting the speed of the LFO. The LFO is restarting every time the pattern, this particular track sequence starts over. So at this speed, you can actually see that the wave is going up. It can't quite reach even a quarter. It actually reaches almost a quarter, and then it resets at the end of the sequence. And you'll notice as I increase the speed, it's able to move further along the depth of 32. So it's basically moving from slice 1 to 32. And the faster I move this, the more it's going to start, the faster it's going to go. So it ends up actually lapping the sequence before the sequence is over. So you end up getting like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 iterations of that sequence. Phenomenologically, what's going on is you hear new iterations that are essentially randomized, but they do repeat. So basically, each value of this speed function, each value of this speed parameter will give you a different choice of these slices, but we'll keep it within this pattern, within this rhythm. So you'll see that this does repeat if I keep it on 29. And so this to me is huge. And I'm sure somebody's covered this before in the past, but to me it really just unlocks the potential of really exploring rhythm on its own without having to worry about these other things. Because essentially I can just kind of like arbitrarily choose slices. Clear it. And then when I want to adjust it, switch it up. I was even trying to figure out some way that I could have the program automatically switch the pattern up like once every like 4 bars or so. Still haven't found a very elegant solution to that, but in the meantime, all you have to do to change a pattern that you're working with is just hit the speed knob just a little bit. I mean, anything will change it. Like if, you know, by the time I'm going to speed like 106 based on this multiplier, I don't even know how fast this wave is moving. I don't know how many times it passes, and how many times it's repeating in one bar phrase. So it might as well be just like a random selection. So this is, to me, a much faster way than just hitting, you know, randomized slices, random locks every single time. Because then also you run into this issue of like having these locks. So like if you remove them, then you're still playing the same note over and over again, which would be like whatever the default start slice is. So for this, I can just, if I'm like, okay, this needs a piece right here, I can just, you can even make breaks really easily. And so this creates a little bit more of, this frees up the CPU for me. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to worry about exactly what these slices are. For all intents and purposes, I have no idea, you know? And what's also really cool about this is you could also even think about it as like this 16-step sequence right now, based on this LFO and this depth, has a built-in programmed note for each of these trigs. So like if I'm just hitting these, then it's going to play those same ones on the 9 and the 13 every single time. So I'm basically revealing little pieces of this one sequence. So that eventually when I do want to go back, I can still play that same sequence that's, you know, just the one on every quarter note. So this is pretty exciting stuff. I'm probably going to be using this for quite some time and exploring with it, and I highly recommend you check it out. I did want to kind of add an extra little piece to this because this works not just with rhythm. In fact, I started playing with it as like a melodic thing where I was like, okay, well, what if I just wanted to like include little pieces here and there of like of a pattern that I had like recorded on my synthesizer or something. So I just want to like give you a quick demo of that. So essentially what's going to happen here, I'm going to make a sequence on the OP1. I'm going to record it and loop it on the pickup machine, which is recording to record buffer 1 by default. And then I'm going to switch this pattern, or this track, which is, you know, using this LFO trick to create sequences. I'm going to tell it to be using recording 1 for that, and I'm going to pre-slice it to 32 slices. I'm going to mute this first so that you can hear what I'm creating, and then we can go over to this section here, how it's manipulated and how quickly I can play new patterns out of this single loop. So I'm going to put the mic down so I can do this, and enjoy. So before I start, basically, we have that sequence captured in here. It doesn't even matter that I accidentally recorded the second half here and then it repeats right here, but because I'm about to slice it up anyway. So check this out. I'm going to expand this to 2 bars just to give it some more interesting stuff. And one more note, the LFO, because it's set to trig, sync, trig, it will repeat at the end of this track sequence. I have it set up so that the tracks have individual sequence lengths separate from the master. The trig, sync, trig function allows that pattern to repeat over 2 bars. So even if I copy the same rhythm here, the second page will play an entirely different, or it should, as long as I'm not creating some kind of wave that syncs with it. Anyway, okay. One other thing I can note here is that, like, say I really like this one pattern, 59. I can just remember that one. So I can be like, oh, let's go back to, you know, number 59 or something. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you today, and this was a good enough tip that I think it kind of brought me out of YouTube posting retirement. But in any case, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Let me know if there are any other tricks that you found that kind of like fall along this kind of line. I think that a lot of people have kind of covered using LFOs to trigger random slices, but yeah, I mean, this was just the time that I discovered it, and hopefully some of you haven't heard this before, so you can take that with you. But yeah, hopefully you can expect to see more of my videos. I'm planning on doing more. I do have some things coming up which might make it less than a video per week, but I'm gonna try to get back into it. I've played a ton of shows since I last made a video for you guys, and I've learned a lot of really cool tricks. I just need to find the time to actually make the videos to kind of explain what's going on, but if I can, I will. So thanks again for watching, and see you next time.